Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're sliding into ancient Athens, where the wine flows freely and the conversation flows. Well, let's just say it gets interesting. You're reclining on a cushioned couch in a torch-lit andron, the men's dining room, where respectable citizens are about to engage in activities that would make modern dinner parties look like church socials. The sweet scent of burning myrrh mingles with body oil and fermented grapes, and you're pretty sure someone just suggested a drinking game involving philosophical debates and removing clothing. You probably won't survive this evening with your dignity intact. The ancient Greeks had very different ideas about what constituted appropriate after-dinner entertainment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing whether you're actually using this as bedtime material or secretly listening during your lunch break. All right, let's begin the story. You're attending your first symposium, and already things are getting weird. The host, a wealthy merchant named Alexios, has just finished the deipnon, the eating portion of the evening, and now the real party begins. Slaves clear away the fish bones and barley cakes, while you and 11 other guests arrange yourselves on couches, two to a couch, in a carefully choreographed social dance. The furniture forms a square around the room's edges, leaving the center open for activities. You'll find out what those are soon enough. Bring in the wine, Alexios commands, and servants haul in massive ceramic craters, those huge mixing bowls that look like they could hold a small child. The Greeks never drink their wine straight. That's what barbarians do. Instead, they mix it with water in ratios that would make a modern sommelier weep. Tonight's mixture is 3 parts water to 1 part wine, which Alexios proudly announces is moderate and conducive to philosophical discourse. You notice several guests exchanging knowing glances. Moderate. Right. The symposiarch, tonight's master of ceremonies, is elected through a dice game, and wouldn't you know it, the winner is Dionysios, whose name literally means of Dionysus. This can only end well. He immediately declares the evening's theme, the nature of desire as it relates to civic virtue. Everyone nods seriously, as if this is definitely what they came here to discuss and not an elaborate excuse for what's about to unfold. First, we must invoke the gods, Dionysios intones, pouring libations onto the floor. Each guest takes turns splashing wine and invoking various deities. Someone invokes Aphrodite for obvious reasons, earning chuckles. Another calls upon Dionysus himself, patron of wine and madness. You mumble something about Athena and wisdom, which gets you some side eyes. Clearly, you haven't grasped tonight's subtext. The drinking begins in earnest with the first crater. Greeks have a saying, the first crater is for health, the second for pleasure, the third for sleep. They conveniently forget to mention what the fourth, fifth, and sixth are for, but you're about to find out. The wine-water mixture tastes like diluted cough syrup with hints of pine resin. They add that to prevent spoilage, though you suspect it's really to mask the fact that ancient wine is basically agricultural runoff with ambitions. "Let's play Kottabos," someone shouts, and suddenly everyone's flinging wine dregs at bronze targets across the room. The game involves flicking the last drops from your kylix, that shallow drinking cup that's impossible to set down without spilling, at various targets. Hit the bronze disc and it makes a satisfying clang. Miss and you drench your couchmate. It's like beer pong for people who quote Homer. The philosophical discussion begins, as promised. What is the relationship between physical pleasure and intellectual achievement? Dionysios poses. A bearded gentleman named Crichton launches into a speech about how bodily desires must be controlled through reason. He's making some decent points about Platonic ideals when Alexios interrupts. But surely, Crichton, complete denial of pleasure, is itself a form of excess. This sparks a heated debate about moderation versus abstinence, during which everyone keeps drinking. You notice the arguments becoming increasingly creative as the second crater empties. Someone argues that since the gods themselves indulge in earthly pleasures, Zeus couldn't keep it in his toga if his life depended on it. Then human desire must be divine. Another counters that humans should strive to be better than the gods. This earns him a cushion to the face. By the third crater, the entertainment arrives. A young woman with a flute enters, followed by a boy with a lyre. But these aren't your average musicians. As they play, they begin a dance that would definitely violate several public decency laws in your time. The music is hypnotic, all minor keys and rhythmic drumming that seems to bypass your brain and speak directly to your, well, let's call it your Dionysian side. Ah, Alexios sighs contentedly. Nothing like a good auletress to set the mood. The flute girl, you learn, is a standard fixture at these parties. She's part musician, part dancer, part entertainment coordinator. The boy with the lyre is her assistant, and together they're about to demonstrate why Greek vases in museums are kept in the adults-only sections. The philosophical discussion hasn't stopped. Mind you, it's just become more applied. Consider, slurs a merchant named Theophilos, if pleasure is the absence of pain, as Epicurus suggests, then maximum pleasure requires first the experience of pain. He attempts to stand to make his point more dramatically, fails spectacularly, and concludes his argument from the floor. Someone suggests a poetry competition. Each guest must compose verses on the spot, with increasingly ribald themes. The winner gets to make a rule for the next round of drinking. The loser has to perform a forfeit that usually involves removing clothing or embarrassing confessions. You fumble through a limerick about Zeus and swans that earns polite applause and allows you to keep your tunic. The fourth crater arrives, and with it, someone mentions Corinth. Ah, the city of Aphrodite Pandemos, sighs a traveling merchant, using the goddess's title that means of all the people, which is ancient Greek for available to everyone. You lean forward, intrigued despite yourself, as he begins describing the temple that crowns the Acrocorinth, that massive rock jutting above the city like a geographic advertisement for what goes on up there. 1,000 priestesses, he says, eyes glazing with memory or wine or both, all dedicated to serving the goddess through the sacred act of love. The room erupts in debate. Half the guests insist it's only a few hundred priestesses, while others claim the number is purely symbolic. Historians still argue whether these hierodulae, sacred slaves, actually existed in such numbers, or if horny travelers just really wanted to believe they did. You try to wrap your mind around the concept. These women, and some men too, supposedly offer their bodies as a form of worship, with the proceeds going to the temple treasury. It's prostitution with a cosmic permission slip, though the Greeks don't see it that way. To them, recreating the goddess's favorite activity is a form of prayer. The fact that it involves an exchange of silver drachmas is just administrative necessity. My cousin went there last summer, pipes up young Nikias, barely old enough to grow a beard. He said the priestesses wear special robes that identify their rank. The higher the rank, the more expensive the blessing. Everyone nods knowingly, as if discussing municipal tax rates rather than sacred prostitution pricing tiers. The merchant continues his travelogue. The approach to the temple is lined with marble phalluses, he says, gesturing dramatically with his kylix and sloshing wine on his neighbor. Some are taller than a man. Devotees leave offerings at their bases, flowers, honey cakes, small coins. I saw one woman rubbing olive oil on a particularly impressive specimen while praying for her husband's virility. Did it work? Someone asks. Well, she was back the next week with a larger offering, so draw your own conclusions. The conversation meanders to other cities' practices. In Babylon, you learn every woman must serve once in the temple of Ishtar, waiting until a stranger chooses her by tossing silver into her lap. She can't refuse the first offer, no matter how paltry, which seems like a terrible business model, but apparently the goddess isn't concerned with market economics. It's not just temples, argues Alexios. What about the Aphrodisia festivals? Every spring, the entire city transforms into one giant tribute to carnal desire. He's not wrong. During these celebrations, normal social rules evaporate like morning dew in the Aegean sun. Married women process through streets carrying giant wooden phalluses. Teenagers sing obscene songs that would normally earn them a beating. Even the most dignified citizens paint their faces and join the revelry. A philosopher named Xenophon, not the famous one, this city has like 12 Xenophons, attempts to elevate the discussion. Consider the theological implications, he proposes, swaying slightly. If physical union can bring divine blessing, then perhaps the body itself is sacred, not shameful as some claim. This triggers a heated debate about whether the gods actually care about human sexuality, or if they're too busy turning into bulls and seducing mortals to notice. Someone mentions that Zeus has fathered approximately half of Greece's legendary heroes through creative interpretations of consent and species barriers. If the king of the gods can become a swan for love, they argue, who are we to judge what happens between consulting adults in a temple? The flute girl, who's been providing background music this whole time, begins a piece that's definitely not standard symposium fare. The notes seem to slither through the air, and you realize she's playing one of those Phrygian melodies that supposedly drive listeners to frenzy. Several guests begin swaying involuntarily. The boy with the lyre joins in, and their combined music creates an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a bronze dagger. Speaking of temples, interjects a grain merchant, my brother just returned from Cyprus, where they have this ritual. He pauses for dramatic effect, enjoying the anticipation. The priestesses there anoint themselves with special oils infused with stimulating herbs. They say one touch can drive a man to madness with desire. What herbs? Demands Theophilos, suddenly focused despite consuming enough wine to fell a Spartan. Oh, the usual myrrh, cinnamon, something called silphium that's worth its weight in silver. Silphium, you learn, is the ancient world's most effective contraceptive, so valuable that it appears on coins, and so over-harvested it'll be extinct in a few centuries. The priestesses apparently know their practical theology. The merchant from Corinth isn't finished. The truly devoted can purchase sacred tokens, he explains, producing what looks like a small clay tablet with some very suggestive imagery. Present this at the temple, and you receive special attention. They say the goddess herself possesses the priestess during the act. Convenient, mutters someone. The goddess always seems to possess the pretty ones. You're starting to understand that Greek religion is extremely hands-on, where your time treats sex and spirituality as opposites. These people see them as dance partners. The sacred and profane intertwine, like lovers on a painted vase, each enhancing the other. It's either deeply philosophical or just elaborate rationalization, and after 4 craters of wine, you're not sure there's a difference. The symposium's energy shifts as someone suggests they reenact the sacred marriage of Zeus and Hera. This apparently involves a lot more nudity than you'd expect from a religious ceremony, but then again, you're learning that ancient Greeks had very different expectations about where clothing was and wasn't appropriate. 2 guests volunteer to play the divine couple, and their interpretation would definitely not make it into any modern children's mythology book. In Canopus, offers another guest, referring to the Egyptian port city. They've combined Greek and Egyptian practices. The priestesses of Aphrodite Isis wear masks during the rituals, so you never know if you're blessed by a beauty or a crone. This sparks debate about whether anonymity enhances or diminishes the sacred nature of the act. The consensus seems to be that mystery adds to the divine experience, though you suspect that's just men trying to justify poor decision-making after too much Egyptian beer. As the 5th crater makes its appearance, weren't you supposed to stop at 3? The philosophical veneer grows increasingly thin. Someone's demonstrating proper offering technique using breadsticks and honey. Another guest insists on showing everyone a small statue of Priapus he carries for good luck, though what kind of luck requires a god with a phallus larger than his entire body is left unsaid. The conversation takes an uncomfortable turn when Crichton, still attempting philosophical dignity despite wine stains decorating his hymation like abstract art, raises the topic everyone's been dancing around. Let us discuss the institution of paiderastia, he announces, using the formal term for what your time calls pederasty. The room doesn't exactly fall silent. Greeks don't do subtle, but there's a shift in energy, like when someone mentions politics at Thanksgiving dinner. You squirm on your couch as Crichton launches into what sounds like a doctoral thesis. The relationship between Erastes and Eromenos, he explains, referring to the adult lover and the younger beloved, represents the highest form of education. Through intimate guidance, we shape tomorrow's citizens. The way he emphasizes intimate makes you reach for more wine. My own mentor, Callias, was the finest Erastes a youth could hope for, reminisces Theophilos, who apparently needs to share. He taught me rhetoric, wrestling, and the proper way to appreciate Homer. Someone snorts. Is that what we're calling it now? Appreciating Homer? But Theophilos continues earnestly. The physical aspect was merely pedagogical enhancement. You're discovering that ancient Greeks have euphemisms that would make a Victorian blush. The relationship between an adult man, usually in his 20s or 30s, and an adolescent boy, typically 12 to 18, is wrapped in so many layers of social protocol and philosophical justification that it's almost possible to forget what's actually happening. Almost. The key, explains Dionysios, warming to the topic like it's a wine vintage discussion, is the proper courtship ritual. The Erastes must prove his worth through gifts and demonstrations of virtue. The boy's father must approve. The relationship must benefit the youth's social standing. He ticks off requirements like he's reading a municipal building code, which in a way, he is. This is institutionalized, codified, and everyone pretends it's about education. A younger guest named Philippos, clearly anxious about the topic, asks, "But what about the gymnasium protocols?" Ah, yes, the gymnasium, that cornerstone of Greek civilization where nude men oil themselves up and wrestle. Definitely no opportunities for inappropriate behavior there. The older men explain the elaborate rules. Eromenoi must never appear too eager, must resist initial advances, must never accept money. Gifts are fine, money is prostitution. It's like hearing someone explain the rules of a game you really wish didn't exist. In Sparta, someone offers, because apparently this evening needed more discomfort. They've refined the system even further. Every youth must have a mentor. By law, they call them inspirers. Ficum, the Spartans, you learn, believe this relationship creates unbreakable military bonds. Nothing says hold the line against the Persians like complicated psychosexual dynamics. The flute girl, who's been playing increasingly sultry melodies, switches to something more martial. You suspect she's done this routine before, musical commentary on the conversation. Her assistant produces a small drum, and the rhythm becomes insistent, almost hypnotic. Several guests begin unconsciously moving to the beat. What I don't understand, slurs Nicias, the youngest present, is why we pretend the physical element is secondary. Everyone knows what happens in those private wrestling lessons. This breach of social protocol creates a moment of tension. You're not supposed to acknowledge the obvious. Apparently, it's like Fight Club, but with more olive oil and moral gymnastics. Xenophon the philosopher attempts damage control. The physical expression, when it occurs, represents the transfer of masculine virtue from the mature citizen to the developing youth. It's a sacred duty, not mere pleasure. He manages to say this with a straight face, which is impressive considering he's listing to starboard like a trireme in a storm. The debate intensifies. Some argue the practice creates excellence. Look at all the great men who emerged from such relationships. Socrates himself was known for his mentorships, though he claimed to keep things platonic, a term that won't exist for a few more decades. Others point out the potential for abuse, quickly shouted down with accusations of prudishness. My nephew in Thebes, offers Alexios, tells me they've perfected the system there. The sacred band, their elite military unit, consists entirely of paired lovers, 150 couples who fight side by side. He sounds almost envious. They say no force can break them because each man fights not just for glory, but for his beloved watching beside him. This triggers war stories. Everyone has a tale of battlefield romance, of young soldiers inspired to greatness by their older lovers' expectations. It's simultaneously touching and deeply disturbing, like watching someone put ketchup on a fine steak. You understand it's their choice, but you really wish they wouldn't. The wine continues flowing, and inhibitions dissolve like salt in the sea. Someone produces a kylix painted with scenes that would require several trigger warnings in your time. They pass it around, each guest adding increasingly creative commentary on the depicted activities. Educational purposes. They insist. Right. The key is moderation, insists Criton, who's anything but moderate at this point. A proper Erastes knows when to advance and when to withdraw. It's like siege warfare. Patience and strategy overcome crude assault. And the military metaphors for romantic pursuit pile up like hoplite bodies after a phalanx collision. Everything is conquest, territory, strategic advantage. Historians still argue whether these relationships were as universal as the sources suggest, or if we're hearing from a vocal minority with excellent publicity. Maybe most Greeks found it as uncomfortable as you do, but didn't write it down because they were too busy farming olives and trying not to die from minor infections. But here, in this torch-lit room, surrounded by Athens' social elite, it's clear this isn't fringe behavior, it's Tuesday. A new guest arrives late, apologizing profusely. I was detained at the wrestling grounds, he explains. Young Aristophon needed extra instruction in holds. The knowing chuckles that greet this excuse make you wonder if wrestling instruction is the ancient equivalent of Netflix and chill. The symposium's atmosphere grows heavier, like the air before a thunderstorm. The mix of wine, music, and increasingly frank discussion creates a pressure that needs release. Someone suggests a game where each man must name his first Erastes and describe the most important lesson learned. You panic. You don't have a story for this. Claiming you were raised by wolves seems implausible, even in your current state. Fortune favors you as Dionysios suddenly stands, swaying like a ship's mast in rough seas, and declares, "Enough talk. Tonight, we transcend mere mortal pleasures. Who among you has been initiated into the mysteries?" The room erupts in overlapping voices, each claiming connection to different secret rites. You're saved from inventing a pederastic past by this shift toward religious ecstasy. The Eleusinian mysteries are child's play, scoffs a merchant named Proclus, wine sloshing from his cup. Last month, I participated in the true Dionysian rites in the mountains. What happens there? He pauses dramatically, eyes gleaming with remembered madness. Let's just say the god himself possessed us. You've heard whispers about these nocturnal ceremonies, groups of otherwise respectable citizens fleeing to the wilderness for nights of ritual madness. The official state-sanctioned mysteries at Eleusis are one thing, with their orderly processions and symbolic death and rebirth narratives. But these mountain rites, that's where things get genuinely weird. Tell us everything, demands Alexios, and Proclus needs no further encouragement. We gathered at midnight, men and women together, already scandalous. Yes, the priestesses wore fawn skins and carried thyrsi. These ritual staffs, topped with pine cones and wrapped in ivy, sound innocuous until you learn what they symbolize and where they sometimes end up during the festivities. The music shifts again, the flute girl somehow producing sounds that shouldn't come from any earthly instrument. The notes seem to crawl under your skin, making your heart race and your pupils dilate. Several guests begin moving unconsciously, bodies swaying to rhythms older than civilization. First came the wine, Proclus continues, but not this watered-down symposium fare, pure, unmixed, laced with additions. He winks conspiratorially. Mushrooms from Phrygia, herbs that open the mind's eye, substances that dissolve the boundaries between self and cosmos. You're starting to understand that Dionysian mysteries are less about spiritual enlightenment and more about getting absolutely destroyed on prehistoric psychedelics. Another guest, Nicodemus, jumps in. I was at Mount Cithaeron last winter. The Maenads there, those female devotees, they achieve states of divine possession you wouldn't believe. I saw a woman tear a goat apart with her bare hands, then dance with the bloody pieces like they were silk scarves. He shudders at the memory, though whether from horror or excitement is unclear. Sparagmos, someone whispers, the ritual rending of flesh that represents the god's own dismemberment. In their ecstatic state, participants apparently recreate Dionysus's mythical death and resurrection by literally tearing animals, and occasionally, rumors suggest, humans, apart. It's therapeutic in the way that screaming into a pillow is therapeutic. If your pillow was a living creature and you were high on ergot, the conversation becomes a competition of who's witnessed the most extreme rites. Someone describes priestesses running barefoot through winter snow, feeling no cold in their divine frenzy. Another talks about men who dance until they collapse, foam at the mouth, and speak prophecies in languages they don't know. It sounds like a combination of rave culture, group therapy, and psychotic break with a religious permit. The true mystery, insists Xenophon, still trying to intellectualize everything, is the union with the divine through ecstasis, standing outside oneself. He's not wrong. These rites promise participants direct contact with divinity through the complete abandonment of rational thought and social constraints. It's enlightenment through confusion, clarity through chaos. You learn about the omophagia, the consumption of raw flesh, that represents incorporating the god's essence. Participants in full mystical frenzy apparently bite into still warm animal parts, blood running down their chins as they achieve communion with Dionysus. Someone passes around a cup of wine mixed with honey and spices, and you pray it doesn't contain any additions as you take your obligatory sip. My wife participates in the women's rights, admits Theophilos, which raises eyebrows. Married women, normally confined to domestic duties, transform into maenads during these festivals, abandoning homes and children for nights of mountain wildness. She returns, changed, more alive, yet also more distant. She looks at our ordinary life like it's a dream she's temporarily inhabiting. The flute reaches a crescendo, and several guests leap up. Unable to resist the music's pull, they begin dancing, if you can call it that. It's more like controlled falling, bodies moving in ways that suggest their joints have become negotiable. Someone produces a thyrsus from somewhere. Do they just carry these around? And the dancing becomes more frenzied. In Thrace, shouts someone over the music. They do it properly. None of this philosophical nonsense, just pure divine madness. Thrace, you gather, is where Dionysian worship originated, brought south by traders and modified by Greeks who couldn't quite handle the full-strength version, like importing absinthe and adding water until it's basically licorice tea. Proclus isn't finished with his mountain adventure. At the peak of the rite, when the moon was highest, the god appeared. This claims sobers the room slightly. Divine epiphany is serious business, even when discussed by drunk philosophers. Not in person, he clarifies, seeing skeptical faces. But his presence filled the clearing. The trees themselves seemed to dance. Colors that don't exist in daylight painted the air. I understood, in that moment, why we call him the Liberator. Liberation from what, exactly? Social constraints, rational thought, the burden of civilization, all of the above. Apparently, these mysteries promise temporary release from the grinding pressure of being human in a world full of rules and expectations. For one night, you can be a beast, a god, or something in between. What about the morning after? Asks practical Nikias, when you wake up covered in blood and pine needles with no memory of how you got there. That's when the real mystery begins, replies Proclus cryptically. You return to your daily life, but you're not the same. You've tasted something beyond mortal experience. Sometimes, sitting in the agora discussing grain prices, I'll smell pine resin and hear distant drums, and for a moment, he trails off, lost in reverie. The impromptu dance performance intensifies. Someone's stripped to their undertunic and is recreating what they claim is authentic chorebantic dancing, the frenzied whirling that induces prophetic states. Another guest accompanies on an improvised drum, an overturned crater. The line between sophisticated symposium and primitive ritual blurs like watercolors in rain. Historians still argue whether these extreme rites were widespread or exaggerated by scandalized sources. Maybe most Dionysian worship involved orderly processions and symbolic wine sharing. But the very existence of laws against unauthorized Bacchic rites suggests something was happening in those mountains that made authorities nervous. The dancing finally exhausts itself, leaving several guests panting on their couches like athletes after a particularly brutal pancration match. Someone calls for water, actual water, not wine, which signals you've reached peak intoxication. As everyone recovers, a new voice pipes up from the corner. It's Antiphon, the gymnasiarch who oversees the local training grounds. Speaking of divine madness, he says, let me tell you about proper Greek exercise. You brace yourself, because if there's one thing Greeks love more than wine and philosophy, it's being naked, and nowhere is nudity more institutionalized than in the gymnasium. Antiphon launches into what sounds like a recruitment speech for his facility, though given the audience's current state, you doubt anyone's signing up for dawn calisthenics tomorrow. The human form, he declares, struggling to his feet and nearly achieving verticality, is the god's greatest artwork. To hide it beneath cloth while training is not just impractical, it's impious. This logic apparently makes perfect sense to everyone except you. He begins demonstrating proper discus form, which would be more impressive if he weren't using a bronze serving plate and listing 30 degrees to port. Tell them about the oil, prompts someone, because apparently this story needs enhancement. Ah, yes, the oil. Antiphon's eyes light up like he's about to reveal the secret to immortality. We don't just strip naked and wrestle like barbarians. First comes the anointing, olive oil mixed with dust or sand for grip. Every athlete must oil his partner before competition. He pauses meaningfully. It's a sacred bonding ritual, also practical. Try grappling a sweaty Greek without oil and sand, like wrestling an eel. The symposium erupts in debate about proper oiling technique. Someone insists circular motions honor Apollo. Another argues for vertical strokes to invoke Hermes' speed. You're learning more about ancient massage techniques than you ever wanted to know, and every description sounds like something from a very specific type of modern literature. In Sparta, begins someone, because apparently every conversation tonight must include Spartan practices. Both men and women exercise nude together. This creates an uproar. Athens might be cosmopolitan, but mixed gender nude athletics is apparently where they draw the line. Several guests loudly insist this is propaganda, while others argue it explains Spartan military supremacy. Nothing motivates proper form like performing squats in front of the opposite sex. Antiphon continues his gymnasium gospel. The beauty of athletic nudity is its democracy. Rich or poor, citizen or medic, everyone looks the same covered in oil and sand. This is patently false. Wealth shows in muscle definition, from better nutrition and leisure time for training, but the wine makes everyone philosophical about equality. What about the Herms? Asks Nicias, referring to those peculiar squared pillars topped with Hermes' head and sporting prominent erect phalluses that mark boundaries throughout Athens. My grandmother says touching one before exercise brings luck. Your grandmother's a wise woman, Antiphon agrees, though luck depends on what you're training for. The laughter suggests everyone understands this innuendo except you. These herms, you learn, serve as more than boundary markers. They're fertility symbols, apotropaic devices to ward off evil, and apparently good luck charms for athletic performance. The fact that Athens has hundreds of stone erections decorating its streets seems totally normal to everyone here. A heated debate breaks out about whether exercising clothed is ever acceptable. Someone mentions that Persians and other barbarians wear pants while riding horses. This is met with disgusted noises and suggestions about what Persians can do with their pants. Greek cultural superiority complex is alive and well, especially when it comes to textile choices. The best part, Antiphon continues, now demonstrating wrestling holds on an unwilling Theophilos, is the apoditarian. This changing room, you learn, is where social magic happens. Men of all ages strip together, oil each other, and engage in the kind of casual intimacy that would send modern gym goers fleeing to their lawyers. Yesterday, I helped the Archon's son work out a shoulder knot. Today, he's recommending me for the city council. Networking, naked networking, someone mumbles into their wine cup, which pretty much summarizes ancient Greek professional development. The conversation turns to famous athletic scandals. There was the runner who forgot to tie his loincloth properly during a race and inadvertently invented competitive nude sprinting when it fell off mid-stride. He won. Everyone decided clothes were clearly holding them back, and now all Greek athletics involve maximum genital freedom. This origin story sounds suspiciously convenient, but historical accuracy has left the building several craters ago. What about women's athletics? Ventures Proclus, still glowing from his Dionysian revelations. In most cities, women exercise clothed and separately. Antiphon admits with obvious disapproval. But during certain festivals, he trails off suggestively. The Heraia, you learn, features young women competing in short tunics that barely cover the essentials. It's religious. Of course, everything involving partial nudity in ancient Greece is religious. Someone produces a kylix decorated with athletic scenes that make you understand why museums keep certain artifacts in special collections. The athletes depicted are engaged in activities that stretch the definition of sport to its breaking point. See how the gods inspire proper form, someone comments with a straight face. My favorite gymnasium practice, slurs Dionysios, who's progressed from philosophical to confessional drunk, is the communal bath afterward. Nothing builds civic bonds like sharing a cold plunge with 40 of your closest neighbors. The logistics of this sound horrifying. Ancient Greek hygiene standards plus communal bathing equals a bacterial paradise, but everyone nods nostalgically. The flute girl, who's been providing increasingly athletic musical accompaniment, strikes up what must be the ancient equivalent of Eye of the Tiger. Several guests attempt synchronized calisthenics, which goes about as well as you'd expect from extremely intoxicated philosophers. Someone's doing jumping jacks, another attempts push-ups, and Antiphon continues demonstrating wrestling moves on increasingly unwilling participants. The true beauty of gymnasium culture, philosophizes Xenophon, because he philosophizes everything, is the erasure of shame. When everyone's naked, no one's naked. This sounds profound until you think about it for more than 2 seconds, but the room erupts in applause like he's just solved mortality. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek athletic nudity was really about practical concerns, clothes chafing, overheating, grip issues, or if it served deeper cultural functions. The evidence suggests it's both. Practical nudity that evolved into ritualized display of physical and social capital. Also, Greeks really liked looking at naked bodies and built an entire civilization that gave them excuses to do so. "You want to talk about naked bodies?" interrupts a voice from the corner. It's Lysander, who's been quietly drinking himself into a philosophical stupor. "Let me tell you about Spartan customs. You Athenians think you're liberal with your gymnasium nudity. Ha!" He staggers to his feet, using his walking stick like a spear. "In Sparta, we make your practices look like Persian prudery." The room's attention shifts like iron filings to a magnet. Everyone loves Spartan stories. They're the ancient equivalent of reality TV, full of violence, sex, and social practices that make you grateful for your own relatively normal city-state. Lysander, who claims to have spent his youth in Sparta as a diplomatic hostage, is about to become the evening's star performer. First, the marriage ritual. He begins, eyes gleaming with wine and memory. When a Spartan man wants to marry, he doesn't court with poetry and gifts like you soft Athenians. He abducts his bride. And the room erupts in protests and clarifications. Surely he means symbolic abduction. No, no, Lysander insists. Full abduction. The girl fights back. Her friends try to prevent it. It's like a military exercise with wedding bells. You learn that after this romantic kidnapping, the bride's head is shaved and she's dressed in men's clothing. The groom visits her in darkness, Lysander explains, sometimes for months, sneaking away from his military barracks for conjugal raids. Many Spartan men father children before ever seeing their wives in daylight. This sounds less like marriage and more like an extremely complicated military operation with orgasms. But that's just the beginning, he continues, warming to his theme like a torch in oil. Spartan boys are taken from their mothers at age 7 for the agoge, the training system. They live in communal barracks, barely clothed even in winter, fighting each other for food and status. Someone mentions this sounds like child abuse. Lysander waves dismissively. It creates perfect warriors. Also, interesting bonding dynamics. The details that follow make your wine taste sour. Boys encouraged to steal food, but beaten if caught. Not for theft, but for being caught. Older boys mentoring younger ones in ways that make Athenian pederasty look like chaperoned tea parties. The Cryptaia, where young men hunt helots, Spartan slaves, like animals to prove their worth. It's systematic brutalization dressed up as education. Tell them about the communal wives, someone prompts, because apparently this horror show needs additional acts. Lysander grins. Ah yes, Lycurgus's greatest innovation. Strong men can request to borrow another man's wife to produce superior offspring. The husband often agrees. It's considered an honor. Imagine lending your wife to the Olympic champion because his spear throwing genes might improve your bloodline. Yet the room divides between those horrified by this arrangement and those wondering if their wives have any Olympic quality admirers. And the women. Lysander's voice rises with enthusiasm. They exercise naked alongside men, running, wrestling, throwing javelins. Their marriage age girls perform nude dances at religious festivals, thighs showing maidens, we call them. He demonstrates what can only be described as interpretive Spartan girl athletics, which mostly involves him falling over repeatedly while making javelin throwing motions. The flute girl switches to a martial melody, apparently inspired by the Spartan theme. Her assistant begins a rhythmic beating that sounds like military drums. Several guests start mock marching around the room, creating the world's drunkest phalanx. What about the Syssitia? Asks Antiphon, referring to the communal meals where Spartan citizens eat together. Black broth, Lysander says with the reverence others reserve for ambrosia. Pork boiled in blood and vinegar. Visiting dignitaries gag on it, but Spartans consider it divine nectar, though that might be because they're basically starved as children. Anything tastes good when you've been living on stolen food and beatings. Someone jokes that this explains Spartan military success. They're eager to die in battle to escape their lifestyle. Lysander doesn't disagree. But it works. 300 Spartans held Thermopylae against the entire Persian army. Everyone conveniently forgets the several thousand other Greeks who also fought there, because that ruins the narrative. The best part, Lysander continues, now using 2 couches for support, is the festival of Gymnopaedia. Naked youths dance for hours in the summer heat, competing in endurance and beauty. The winners get prime placement in the phalanx. The losers get mocked and can't marry until they redeem themselves. A competition through interpretive nude dance seems like an odd military strategy, but then again, Sparta dominates Greece, so maybe they're on to something. Xenophon, ever the philosopher, attempts analysis. The Spartan system represents the logical extreme of prioritizing state over individual. Every practice, the wife sharing, the child rearing, the ritualized brutality, serves to create perfect citizens. He pauses. Perfectly horrifying citizens, but perfect for their purpose. You haven't heard about the cheese ritual, Lysander adds, because apparently no story is complete without dairy products. During the festival of Artemis Orthia, Spartan boys attempt to steal cheese from the altar while others whip them. It's religious. The blood spilled honors the goddess. Also teaches pain tolerance. I saw a boy's ribs exposed, but he kept crawling toward the cheese. Got a nice wedge of aged goat before passing out. This triggers competitive stories of witnessed Spartan extremes. Someone saw Spartan women exercising while pregnant, believing it produced stronger babies. Another describes Spartan boys sleeping on beds of reeds they gathered themselves, no tools allowed, hands bloody from breaking the stems. Each tale tops the last in casual brutality. But surely they must show affection sometimes, asks young Nicias, still naive enough to believe in human kindness. Oh, they do, Lysander assures him. Spartan mothers show love by telling sons to come back with their shields or on them, Fathers express pride by watching their sons get flogged without flinching. It's touching, really, in a please kill me sort of way. The room fills with nervous laughter. Everyone's grateful they're Athenian. Where the worst childhood trauma is a boring rhetoric teacher, not institutionalized starvation and violence. Sure, Athens has its problems, but at least they don't consider child abuse a pedagogical tool. What happens to boys who can't handle the agoge? Someone asks. They become perioesai, free non-citizens, or they die. Sparta doesn't really do middle ground. Lysander says this matter-of-factly, like discussing wheat prices. Though I heard of one boy who failed the training but became an excellent cook, they let him live because someone needs to make the black broth properly. Even Spartans have standards. Historians still argue whether these accounts of Spartan life are accurate or exaggerated by horrified, fascinated outsiders. Maybe actual Sparta was slightly less dystopian than the stories suggest. But the fact that multiple independent sources describe similar practices suggests that yes, Sparta really was that intense about creating the perfect warrior state. The Spartan horror stories have sobered the room slightly. Nothing kills a buzz like institutional child abuse, so Alexios claps his hands. Enough of Spartan grimness. Let's discuss something more cheerful. The Anthesteria begins next week. The mood shifts immediately. If there's one thing that can wash away the taste of black broth and brutality, it's the promise of Athens's most delightfully deranged spring festival. Ah, the flower festival, sighs Dionysios, using the celebration's innocent-sounding name, while his expression suggests he's remembering anything but flowers. The Anthesteria, you learn, is 3 days of increasingly unhinged celebration that makes modern Mardi Gras look like a church picnic. First day, Pythoigia, the jar opening, explains Criton, attempting to sound scholarly despite swaying like a mast in a storm. We open the new wine jars and drink to Dionysus. Everyone drinks, slaves, children, even the dogs if they're willing. The image of intoxicated Greek dogs stumbling through Athens almost makes you smile. My favorite is day 2, interrupts Proclus. Choose the jugs, the drinking contest where everyone gets their own pitcher and races to finish. Last year, I saw the priest of Zeus literally carried home on a plank. He kept insisting he could walk, but his legs had other opinions. The room erupts with competitive drinking stories. Someone claims to have finished their chows, about 3 liters, in under an hour. Another insists they saw a woman beat all the men in her district, then challenge the winner from the next street over. The festival apparently transforms Athens into one giant fraternity party with religious overtones. But the real magic, Alexios says with the air of someone revealing state secrets, happens during the sacred marriage. On the second night, the wife of the Archon Basilius, the king Archon, is ritually married to Dionysus himself. The god, being inconveniently divine and or fictional, is represented by, well, that's where things get interesting. Some say it's the Archon wearing a mask. Theophilos offers. Others insist it's a priest in full costume. My cousin swears she saw the actual god manifest, but she'd been drinking since dawn, so... The uncertainty adds to the ritual's power. Is the city's most respectable matron actually consummating with a deity, or just playing divine dress up with elaborate props? Don't forget the phallophoria, adds Antiphon, because no Greek festival is complete without parading giant wooden penises through the streets. Last year's procession had one so large it took 6 men to carry. They had to duck under the propylaea, nearly knocked Athena's statue off its pedestal. Imagine explaining that to the goddess. You're noticing a pattern. Every Greek religious festival seems to involve either getting catastrophically drunk, waving model genitalia around, or both. It's like they looked at spiritual transcendence and decided the best route was through your liver and libido. The children's participation is educational. Nicias notes carefully. During Anthesteria, 3-year-olds are given their first taste of wine in tiny ceremonial jugs. They paint the little ones with flower crowns and let them join the procession. Nothing says wholesome family fun like toddlers doing Dionysian rituals. Speaking of family fun, Lysander interjects, still stuck on his Spartan kick. In Sparta, the Hyacinthia, he's immediately pelted with cushions and olive pits. No more Sparta, the room shouts in unison. We're discussing civilized debauchery here. The conversation returns to Anthesteria's third day, Kitroi, the pots. This is when things get weird, even by Greek standards. Pots of seeds are prepared for Hermes Psychopompos, guide of souls, because apparently the dead visit during the festival. Families feast while leaving empty seats for deceased relatives. It's Halloween meets Thanksgiving meets a wine festival, Greek style. The best part, Proclus insists, is that all temples close except Dionysus's. For one day, he's the only god in town. Even Athena takes a holiday. The theological implications of this, that other deities essentially clock out while Dionysus throws a rager, seems perfectly reasonable to everyone present. My wife organizes our neighborhood's swinging ceremony. Theophilos mentions casually, "You nearly choke on your wine before realizing he means literal swinging, young women on flower-decorated swings, singing fertility songs." Though given everything else about this festival, your initial interpretation wasn't entirely unreasonable. Don't forget the sacred drama, Xenophon adds. The theaters perform the gods' mysteries. Last year I saw an actor playing Dionysus seduce literally every other character, including a questionably anthropomorphized vine. The costume department outdid themselves with that tendril work. The room descends into competitive reminiscence about past Anthesteria highlights. Someone saw a procession where the phallus bearers got into a turf war with another neighborhood's parade, resulting in what can only be described as a penis joust. Another recalls the year when bad weather forced the outdoor ceremonies inside, leading to several small fires and one memorably destroyed altar. What about the Iora? Asks someone, referring to the swinging ritual that commemorates a dark myth. A girl named Aragone hanged herself after finding her father dead, and now Athenian girls swing on ropes during the festival to honor her, prevent her ghost's anger. The logic is fuzzy, but it results in dozens of young women on swings singing obscene songs, so theological coherence takes a back seat. The real scandal, Lysander's stage whispers, having recovered from his cushion assault, is what happens in the Marsh's sanctuary. The Gerarai, those priestesses sworn to secrecy, they perform rites so ancient, so powerful, that no man may witness them. Speculation runs wild. Orgies, blood sacrifice, divine possession. The mystery adds spice to an already well-seasoned festival. I'll tell you what's truly shocking, Crichton interjects with drunken seriousness. The mixing of social classes. Where else do slaves drink alongside citizens? Where else do respectable matrons dance next to prostitutes? For 3 days, Athens pretends hierarchy doesn't exist. He pauses. Then we go back to treating slaves like furniture, but for 3 days. The hypocrisy doesn't seem to bother anyone. Greek democracy, where all men are equal, except for the slaves, foreigners, and women. But sometimes we all get drunk together, so it's fine. The cognitive dissonance could power a philosophy department. Remember 2 years ago? Alexios asks. When that visiting Persian dignitary attended? Everyone groans at the memory. Apparently, the poor man witnessed the phallus procession, the public drunkenness, and what he described as chaos worship, then fled back to Persepolis, convinced Greeks were insane. He's not wrong, someone points out. As the 6th, or is it 7th, crater arrives, the symposium itself begins resembling a mini anthesteria. Someone's fashioned a makeshift thyrsus from a walking stick and somebody's discarded wreath. The flute girl has given up on structured melodies and is just producing sounds that could generously be called experimental. Several guests are attempting to recreate festival dances, with results that would make Dionysus himself suggest maybe switching to water. You think festival phalluses are impressive? Slurs a new voice. It's Aristodemos, the theater producer who's been nursing the same cup for an hour, waiting for his moment. Let me tell you about comedy in Athens. We don't just wave wooden penises around. We strap them on actors and make them government-funded art. The room's attention swivels to this new topic, like drunks following a rolling amphora. Greek theater, that pinnacle of cultural achievement, where democracy meets dick jokes in perfect harmony. Aristodemos stands, nearly achieves balance, and begins what can only be described as a TED Talk for the totally intoxicated. Last month's Linnea Festival, he begins, referring to another Dionysian celebration, because apparently Greeks never met a reason to drink they didn't like. Featured Aristophanes' latest comedy. Every actor wore a phallus the size of a child's arm. The lead character's was articulated. It could wave at the audience. He demonstrates this mechanical marvel using his arm and creative sound effects. But that's standard, scoffs Theophilos. I saw a play where the chorus of wasps all had stinger penises. They chased the protagonist around the stage, threatening to pollinate him. Political satire at its finest. The wasps represented jury members who screw defendants. The metaphor is about as subtle as the prosthetic penises apparently were. You're learning that Greek comedy operates on the principle that if you can't make your point with words, add more genital-based props until the message becomes clear. It's democracy in action. Even the poorest citizen can afford a theater ticket to watch actors in massive phalluses mock politicians. The best part, Aristodemus continues, now using two cushions to demonstrate stage blocking, is the parabasis, when the chorus drops character and directly insults audience members. Last week they called out the Archon for his inadequate dedication to Aphrodite, if you know what I mean. His wife laughed louder than anyone. Tell them about the clouds, prompts Nicias, referring to Aristophanes' famous satire of Socrates. Ah, yes, they portrayed Socrates in a basket, suspended above the stage, literally with his head in the clouds. But the best bit? His students below all bent over, studying the ground with their asses in the air. When asked what they're doing, they explain they're pursuing geological research while their rear ends study astronomy. The double-ended learning approach apparently brought down the house. The conversation explodes into favorite theatrical obscenities. Someone recalls a play where Zeus, portrayed with a phallus so large it required its own operator, chased various mortals around the stage, while his wife Hera followed with a comically oversized fly swatter. Another mentions the chorus of frogs, whose croaking was obviously code for something else entirely, though what that was depends on your level of intoxication and imagination. But it's not just random obscenity, insists Xenophon, still trying to intellectualize everything despite being well past coherent. The phalluses represent fertility, democracy, freedom of expression. He's interrupted by Lysander making crude gestures with a bread roll, or sometimes they just represent penises. The Spartan offers helpfully. My favorite staging, Aristodemus continues, was Eupolis's cities. Each Greek city-state was portrayed as a woman, and Athens. Let's just say her costume left little to imagination while leaving everything to imagination, if you understand. Everyone nods as if this makes perfect sense, which in your current state, it almost does. The technical requirements for these performances sound insane. Actors trained to deliver lines while managing unwieldy costume appendages. Chorus members synchronize obscene dances involving props that would make modern Broadway blush. The crane operator who creates the Deus Ex Machina effects also has to avoid knocking over the lead actor's meter-long phallus during divine entrances. What about women's roles, asks someone, which creates momentary confusion since women can't act in Greek theater. Oh, the male actors playing women? Aristodemus laughs. They wear padded costumes with exaggerated breasts and hips. Last season, the lead woman had breasts so large they kept hitting other actors during dialogue, made the seduction scene unintentionally violent, or maybe intentionally, with Aristophanes. Who knows? The politicians' reactions are the best part, adds Proclus. Cleon tried to sue Aristophanes for defamation. The play ran for extra performances. Now politicians attend their own mockings, laughing loudest to show they're good sports. Nothing says democracy like mandatory enjoyment of your own public humiliation. You learn about theatrical innovations that would never make it into classical literature courses. The thunder machine, a bronze sheet that creates Zeus's rumbling, also doubles as a sound effect for divine flatulence. The McCaney crane doesn't just deliver gods, it's been used to fly actors playing flying penises across the stage. Greek technical theater, solving problems you didn't know existed. My uncle writes tragedies, Nicias offers, trying to elevate the discourse. Very serious, dignified works about fate and suffering. Even tragedies have their moments. Aristodemus counters. Ever notice how many feature bestiality, incest, or creative murder methods? Oedipus literally fucks his mother and blinds himself. Hippolytus dies because his stepmother wants to bed him. Medea feeds Jason his own children. We just dress it up in fancy language and call it exploring the human condition. The arbitrary line between acceptable comedy obscenity and tragic dignity seems to be that comedies acknowledge their ridiculousness, while tragedies pretend dismemberment and incest are philosophical. It's like the difference between porn and erotica, production values and vocabulary. Don't forget the satyr plays, someone adds. These shorter pieces, performed after tragic trilogies, feature choruses of satyrs, those half-goat creatures permanently equipped with erections. They're supposed to provide comic relief after all that heavy tragedy, because nothing lightens the mood after watching Agamemnon get murdered like goat men with visible arousal doing slapstick. The technical challenges of satyr costumes alone boggle the mind. Actors must dance, sing, and perform acrobatics while wearing furry legs, tails, and prominently displayed permanent erections. It's like Cirque du Soleil meets a fetish convention, with state funding. The best satyr play I saw. Theophilos contributes. Had Odysseus trying to escape the Cyclops, while a chorus of randy satyrs kept trying to mount his sheep. The blocking was incredible, synchronized humping while maintaining iambic pentameter. That's craftsmanship. As the conversation continues, you realize Greek theater serves as democracy's pressure valve. Can't actually tell the Archon he's an idiot. Watch an actor do it while wearing a 2-foot phallus. Frustrated with social hierarchies? Enjoy a play where Zeus gets constipation and has to beg mortals for help. It's group therapy with costume malfunctions. Next month's City Dionysia will feature 3 new comedies. Aristodemus announces, including one where Dionysus himself travels to Hades to bring back a decent playwright because Athens has run out. The god of theater literally admitting theater has gone to shit. That's meta-commentary. Speaking of shit, interjects a voice from the corner. It's Hippocrates, not the famous one. Athens has about 30 of them. A physician who's been quietly getting demolished on unmixed wine. Let me tell you about medical science. The room groans collectively, but he's already standing, using a couch for support while gesturing with a kylix that's seen better days. You all mock, he says with the dignity of the deeply drunk, but medicine is serious business. Just last week, a woman came to me with hysteria, wandering womb, classic case. The concept of internal organs going on unauthorized tours of the body seems perfectly reasonable to everyone present. Greek anatomy, where logic goes to die. How did you treat it? Asks Nicias, probably hoping for actual medical knowledge, but about to be deeply disappointed. The standard treatment, of course. Hippocrates beams. Vigorous pelvic massage until she achieved hysterical paroxysm. The womb, satisfied, returns to its proper position, though it took several sessions. Persistent case, very persistent. His eyebrows waggle suggestively enough to power a small windmill. Theophilos jumps in. My wife's physician prescribed marriage as a cure for her green sickness. Apparently, regular intercourse prevents female organs from rebelling, though now she claims headaches need the same treatment. I'm exhausted, but her humors have never been more balanced. You're discovering that Greek medicine operates on the principle that if you don't understand something, it's probably sex related. Headache, not enough orgasms. Fatigue, too many orgasms. Anxiety, incorrectly positioned orgasms. It's like Freud arrived 2,000 years early and set up shop with worse hygiene. The wandering womb is nothing, scoffs Lysander. In Sparta, we treat all ailments with exercise and cold baths. None of this massage nonsense. Everyone ignores him, having established a strict no more Sparta policy. What about male conditions? Proclus asks, then immediately looks like he regrets it. Hippocrates lights up like a festival torch. Ah, satyriasis, persistent, painful erections, very serious. Treatment involves cooling baths, bloodletting from the affected area. Everyone winces, and in severe cases, vigorous exercise to redirect the body's heat. My cousin had that, offers Antiphon. The physician prescribed daily races and wrestling. He became an Olympic athlete, still has the condition, but now he has medals too. The medical theories grow increasingly creative. Apparently, the body contains 4 humors that must be balanced through diet, exercise, and strategic fluid release. Too much blood? Better have sex or bloodletting. Too much phlegm? Oddly, also sex. Black bile excess, you guessed it. Yellow bile? Surprisingly, they recommend dietary changes, but probably only because they haven't figured out how sex would help. Women's medicine is particularly complex. Hippocrates continues, now demonstrating something inappropriate with a wine jug. The female body, being naturally cold and wet, several guests snort wine through their noses, requires regular heating through intercourse. Without it, the womb becomes restless, seeking warmth wherever it can find it. Is that why the womb wanders? Nicias asks with genuine curiosity. Precisely, it's seeking what the woman lacks, namely, male heat and seed. Once provided, it settles down like a fed cat. The image of a uterus as a hungry pet roaming the body seeking snacks would be hilarious if they didn't actually believe it. Xenophon attempts to add philosophical depth. Consider how this reflects the cosmic order, the active male principle bringing order to chaotic female matter, and he's immediately hit with thrown food from multiple directions. We're discussing medical treatments, not your issues with women, someone shouts, the best treatment I've witnessed. Aristodemos, the theater producer, chimes in, was prescribed by a Thessalian healer woman. She used a carved stone olisbos, a dildo, he means a dildo, blessed by Aphrodite, along with sacred herbs. The patient achieved 7 paroxysms and claimed to see the goddess herself. Now she visits the healer weekly for maintenance. This triggers a heated debate about whether artificial devices can provide the same medical benefits as actual intercourse. Some argue the human touch is essential for proper humor balancing. Others insist a well crafted Olasbos, properly blessed, is superior to many husbands. Hippocrates tries to maintain medical authority while clearly having no idea what he's talking about. What about preventative medicine? Someone asks. Regular purging, Hippocrates states confidently. Vomiting, defecation, bloodletting, and of course the sexual release all expel excess humors. I recommend weekly minimum for all excretions. The idea of scheduling bodily functions, like gymnasium appointments, seems perfectly reasonable to ancient Greek minds. My physician, Creton adds, prescribed dream analysis. Erotic dreams indicate humor imbalance. The more elaborate the dream, the more serious the condition. Last month I dreamed of Zeus as a swan, which apparently meant I needed immediate treatment. 3 sessions of therapeutic massage later, I was cured, though now I can't look at waterfowl without blushing. The conversation devolves into competitive medical horror stories. Someone's aunt was prescribed fumigation with burning seal testicles for her wandering womb. Another's uncle underwent trepanation, skull drilling, to release evil spirits causing impure thoughts. The spirits escaped, but so did some important cognitive functions. Don't forget pharmacology, Hippocrates insists, producing a small leather pouch. Silphium for contraception, though it's worth more than gold. Mandrake for pain, but careful, too much and you'll think you're a tree. Poppy tears for sleep and visions. Mix them wrong and you'll sleep forever while dreaming you're a tree using contraception. What's in that pouch? Nicias asks nervously. Professional samples. Hippocrates grins, spilling various dried plants and suspicious powders. This one increases virility. This prevents conception. This causes violent purging from both ends. They look identical, so label carefully. I learned that the hard way at my daughter's wedding feast. Historians still argue whether Greek physicians actually believed these theories or were just making educated guesses with theatrical flair. The fact that some treatments accidentally worked, willow bark for pain, certain herbs for legitimate conditions, probably convinced them the whole system was valid. Broken clocks, twice daily, and all that. The most important medical principle, Hippocrates concludes, swaying dramatically, is that all bodily systems connect to sexual function. A healthy sex life means healthy everything else. It's why we physicians must sometimes provide direct treatment ourselves, purely professionally. Of course. Is that why your clinic has those mysterious treatment rooms with locks on the inside? Theophilos asks innocently. Medical privacy is essential. Hippocrates responds with wounded dignity. The Hippocratic Oath demands discretion. What happens in the healing chamber stays in the healing chamber. Unless it's an interesting case, then I'll present it at the next medical symposium with illustrations. If we're discussing Greek mysteries, announces a voice that's been silent most of the evening, let me tell you about real athletic achievements. It's Callisto's, the former pentathlete whose Olympic glory days are now preserved mainly in wine-fueled reminiscence and a slight limp. You think gymnasium nudity is scandalous? You haven't seen Olympic competition. The room perks up. Everyone loves Olympic stories. They're like war tales, but with more oil and less dying. Usually, Callisto's assumes the position of authority. which involves standing on a couch and nearly falling off before recovering with surprising grace. First, the preparation. He begins. Months of training, special diets, celibacy. Interrupted by laughter. No, truly. Coaches insist that retaining one's seed increases strength. Of course, after competition, he trails off suggestively. Post-Olympic celebrations apparently make Dionysian festivals look tame. Tell them about the oil, prompts Antiphon, always eager for lubrication details. Ah, the oil, not your common gymnasium grade. Olympic athletes use special blends, olive oil infused with herbs, sometimes gold flakes for the wealthy. We'd spend an hour before events just oiling up, glistening like bronze statues, every muscle defined. The judges inspect for proper coverage. Too little oil, you can't compete. Too much, you're disqualified for creating hazardous conditions. What about the performance enhancers? Proclus asks with a knowing grin. Callistos looks offended. We relied on natural methods, bull testicles for strength, raw meat for aggression, wine mixed with herbs that made colors seem brighter and opponents slower, completely natural. The definition of natural seems flexible when your herbal wine makes you hallucinate in slow motion. My favorite event, Theophilos interjects, is the pancration. No rules except no biting or eye gouging, and even those are more suggestions than laws. I competed in pancration, Callisto says proudly, showing scars like medals. Broke a man's arm in my second match. He thanked me afterward, said it was the most beautiful break he'd experienced. We still exchange festival gifts. The Olympic stories grow increasingly outrageous. Wrestlers who dislocated opponents' joints as strategic moves, runners who collapsed at finish lines, evacuating from both ends but still claiming victory. The chariot races where horses and drivers occasionally exploded in tangles of limbs and wood, creating abstract art from athletic ambition. But the real Olympics, Callistos leans in conspiratorially, happens after dark. The athlete's village becomes. Imagine a gymnasium crossed with a symposium multiplied by young men at peak physical condition who've been celibate for months. The victory celebrations alone, adds Aristodemos. I saw a wrestler celebrate by lifting admirers, male and female, above his head while they celebrated on him. He did squats. Olympic records aren't just set on the field. Nicias, ever innocent, asks, surely there are rules about fraternization. The room explodes in laughter. Rules? Callistos wheezes. The only rule is don't interrupt someone's victory lap. I once saw a runner complete 3 different kinds of laps in one night. If you understand, his stamina was legendary in multiple venues. What about the married athletes? Someone asks. Marriage is no barrier to Olympic glory. Callistos explains. Wives understand. It's religious duty. Plus, many believe victorious athletes' seed carries special properties. Women line up hoping to bear future champions. It's practically a civic service. The conversation turns to specific scandals. The boxer who competed with an erection throughout his match, claiming it intimidated opponents. The discus thrower who attributed his record distance to strategic pre-competition tension release. The wrestling judge caught providing very personal coaching between rounds. Don't forget the sacred truce, Xenophon adds, referring to the Olympic peace that allows safe travel to the games. Even warring cities pause hostilities, though I heard Corinth and Argos continued their conflict through competitive fornication in the athletes' village. Whoever pleased more partners claimed diplomatic victory. The best innovation, Callistos continues, was the gymnastic competitions added recently. You haven't lived until you've seen men perform floor routines that are half athletics, half mating display. The judges score both technical merit and aesthetic appeal. Lysander, unable to resist, mentions. In Sparta, our athletes train differently. No more Sparta! The room roars in unison. The medical tent. Hippocrates contributes. Busiest place during Olympics. Torn muscles, broken bones, and exhaustion from various activities. I volunteered once, treated more friction burns than fractures. The things athletes do with victory wreaths shouldn't be physically possible. What about women's events? Asks someone, though everyone knows women mostly can't compete. The Heraia. Callistos nods, referring to the women's games. Young women run in short tunics, very short, scandalously short. The fabric is athletic, moves interestingly during competition. Spectator attendance rivals men's events for some reason. Stories emerge of athletes using increasingly creative training methods. Boxers who practice on sides of beef while nude, claiming it improves their connection to primal strength. Swimmers who train with dolphins, leading to rumors about why dolphins are so friendly to humans. Runners who race against horses while aroused, insisting it improves aerodynamics. The closing ceremonies, Callistos sighs nostalgically. After 5 days of competition, inhibitions are just memories. The final night makes Babylon look prudish. Athletes, trainers, spectators, even some priests, all celebrating human physical achievement in every possible configuration. My cousin judged wrestling last Olympiad. Theophilos shares. Said he spent more time separating overly enthusiastic grapplers than scoring actual moves. Apparently, some holds aren't meant for competition, but kept happening anyway. The medical aspects return as Hippocrates describes Olympic-specific treatments. Victors often suffer from excessive pride, located in the groin region. Treatment requires multiple assistants and careful humor drainage, very specialized work. I've published papers. Remember the scandal with the female trainer? Proclus asks. A woman disguised herself as a man to coach her son, revealed only when she jumped the barrier to celebrate his victory and her disguise shifted. They instituted mandatory nudity for trainers after that, for security purposes. Security, Callistos chuckles. Right. Nothing to do with enjoying the view of athletic trainers demonstrating techniques in nothing but oil and expertise. As the stories wind down, you realize the Olympics represent everything Greek culture values: competition, physical perfection, religious devotion, and finding creative ways to combine sex with literally any activity. It's athletic excellence with a degree in advanced hedonism. The true Olympic spirit, Callistos concludes, nearly falling off his couch podium, is pushing human limits, speed, strength, endurance. In all activities, we honor the gods by exploring every capacity they gave us, repeatedly, with witnesses and official measurements. You want to talk about honoring gods, slurs a figure who's been ominously quiet in the corner. It's Timotheos, whose reputation for dabbling in mystery cults makes even drunk philosophers nervous. The Olympics are child's play compared to true divine communion. Let me tell you about the real mysteries, not that tourist nonsense at Eleusis. The room temperature seems to drop, despite the wine warmth. Mystery cults are serious business, legally and spiritually. Revealing their secrets can mean death, but Timotheos is beyond caring, riding the knife's edge between revelation and execution. The Orphic Mysteries, he begins, eyes unfocused, like he's seeing through the walls, promise immortality through specific rituals. They say Orpheus himself designed them after returning from the underworld. The initiation involves symbolic death and literal rebirth, very literal, very messy. I've heard rumors, Proclus whispers. Something about eggs, Timotheos laughs, a sound like bronze scraping stone. The cosmic egg, yes. Initiates must be reborn through a constructed womb made of oxhide. You're stripped, covered in. Substances meant to simulate primordial fluids, then pushed through while priests chant, emerging covered in blood and honey, screaming your first breath, symbolic, but the fluids are real, the smell stays for weeks. Even this hardened symposium crowd looks queasy. Greeks love their metaphors, but literally reenacting birth through a fake bovine uterus pushes boundaries. That's nothing compared to the Kabirian mysteries, Timotheos continues. On Samothrace, they promise protection at sea, the initiation. Well, you confess your worst crimes to a priest, then undergo purification. The purification method depends on your sins. Minor theft, cold water and prayers. Murder, let's just say Poseidon demands more intimate acquaintance with his domain. And my merchant uncle was initiated there, Antiphon offers. Came back changed. Won't sail without performing certain rituals involving fish oil and private prayers. His wife complains about the smell, but his ships never sink. So, the mysteries multiply as others share fragments. The Corybantes, who cure madness by inducing it, initiates dance to drums until they collapse, possessed by divine frenzy. The cure for insanity is apparently more intensive insanity, like homeopathic medicine, but with more screaming. Tell them about the Kabiri, someone prompts. Timotheos's grin could curdle wine. Ah, the dwarf gods. Their mysteries involve size reversal rituals. The large become small, the small become large. Initiates drink potions that affect perception. You might spend hours convinced you're giant while actually crawling on the ground, or believe you're tiny while stomping through the ceremonial space, terrifying newer initiates who think titans have invaded. And but surely the Eleusinian mysteries are legitimate, Nicias asks hopefully. These state-sanctioned rites are Athens' pride, promising blessed afterlife to initiates. Oh, they're real. Timotheos agrees. But sanitized, the public sees processions and fasting. Inside the telesterion, different story. The kekion drink they serve isn't just barley water. The visions of Persephone aren't just theatrical effects. I saw the goddess herself, felt the pomegranate seeds on my tongue, tasted death and rebirth, also possibly tasted some ergot-contaminated grain, but divine vision and food poisoning feel remarkably similar. Xenophon tries to intellectualize. These mysteries serve psychological functions, confronting death, achieving catharsis through ritual drama. You think it's just psychology? Timotheos interrupts. I've seen initiates speak languages they don't know, predict futures that come true, survive things that should kill them. Either the gods are real and occasionally interested, or we've discovered some very specific ways that's to break human consciousness. Either way, the mysteries work. What about the resurrection cults? Lysander asks, finally contributing something non-Spartan. Which one? Timotheos laughs bitterly. Every mystery promises some form of cheating death. Osiris, Attis, Adonis, gods who die and return. Their initiates reenact the death, sometimes symbolically, sometimes. Well, I knew an initiate of Attis who took the castration requirement literally, says he doesn't regret it, claims he experiences divine ecstasy unavailable to the intact. His wife has different opinions. The room shifts uncomfortably. Self-castration for religious purposes crosses lines even drunk Greeks respect. Mostly. The Pythagoreans have bloodless mysteries, offers Crichton, trying to lighten the mood. Just mathematics and bean avoidance. Bloodless? Timotheos scoffs. You haven't seen their advanced initiations. Sacred geometry carved into flesh, numerical patterns beaten into initiates until they see mathematical truth in everything. They avoid beans because Pythagoras claimed they contain souls, also possibly because he had terrible gas and needed religious justification. Either way, try explaining why you can't eat fava at a dinner party because of metempsychosis. My sister joined a women's mystery cult. Theophilos shares reluctantly. Won't say which one, but she disappears for 3 nights each month, returns exhausted, covered in scratches. Speaking of the Great Mother's embrace, our father thinks she's having an affair. I think that might be preferable to whatever actually happens. Timotheos nods knowingly. The women's mysteries make men's look tame. We play at death and rebirth. They deal with blood monthly. Their mysteries involve powers we can't comprehend. The Thesmophoria, where they throw piglets into chasms and retrieve the rotted remains months later for fertility rituals. That's the public version. The private rites involve things that would make Spartan initiation look nurturing. No Sparta, comes the automatic response, though less enthusiastically. What drives people to these extremes? Nicias wonders aloud. Fear of death, desire for meaning, boredom with ordinary religion. Timotheos lists. Olympic gods are distant, petty, unreliable. Mystery gods promise personal relationships. Sure, that relationship might involve symbolic cannibalism or ritual madness, but at least they're attentive. The state tolerates these cults? Aristodemos asks. Tolerates, monitors, occasionally infiltrates. Timotheos shrugs. As long as mysteries don't threaten state power, they're ignored. Start promising political revolution along with spiritual rebirth. That's when priests mysteriously disappear. The mysteries themselves never die. Suppress one, three more spring up. Humans need secrets like lungs need air. Have you achieved immortality from all these initiations? Proclus jokes weakly. Timotheos stares through him. I've died 17 times in various rites, been reborn 18. One cult was very thorough. I've seen the underworld, spoken with heroes, been possessed by at least 4 different gods. Am I immortal? Ask me when I'm dead. Though if I can answer, that's probably your answer. The symposium has reached that point where profundity and nonsense become indistinguishable. Everyone's contemplating mortality, immortality, and whether that last kylix contained just wine or some of Timotheos's special editions. Mysteries and immortality are all well and good, interrupts a gravelly voice from near the door, but let me tell you about real power. Everyone turns to see Nicodemus, the politician's assistant, who's apparently been drinking since noon based on his spectacular inability to stand straight. You want to know what really happens in Athens? Forget your mysteries. Let's talk about curse tablets. The room's attention sharpens despite the collective intoxication. Curse tablets, those lead sheets inscribed with hexes and buried in graves or wells, occupy the intersection between religion, magic, and pure spite. Everyone knows about them. Everyone denies using them. Everyone has at least one enemy they've considered cursing. Just last week, Nicodemus continues, clutching a column for support. We found 12 tablets buried under the courthouse steps, all targeting the same prosecutor, very specific curses on his ability to speak, think, and perform other functions. Someone really wanted him impotent in every possible way. Did they work? Theophilos asks eagerly. Well, he lost 3 cases. His wife Lev left him for a pottery merchant, and he developed a stutter. Coincidence? The gods work in obvious ways sometimes. Proclus jumps in. My neighbor hired a curse writer last month. Professional scribe, specializes in sexual hexes, charged 2 drachmas per orifice, cursed. The deluxe package includes impotence, uncontrollable lust at inappropriate times, and something called wandering member syndrome. I don't want to know what that means. I know what it means. Hippocrates the physician slurs helpfully. Treated a case once. The patient claimed his penis would detach during sleep and visit his enemies' wives, probably dreaming, but he insisted on sleeping tied to his bed. His wife was surprisingly supportive, said it explained some mysteries. The conversation explodes into curse tablet experiences. Everyone has a story about finding one with their name, knowing someone who commissioned one, or accidentally digging up cache of them while gardening. Athens runs on 2 parallel systems, official democracy and underground magical warfare. The best tablets, Nicodemus explains with professional appreciation, combine multiple approaches. Sexual dysfunction is standard, but creative cursors add specifications. May his members shrivel like a grape in the sun, but swell like a wineskin at Senate meetings. That's artistry. Don't forget the lawsuit curses, Antiphon adds. May his tongue cleave to his mouth. May his words turn to ash. May the jury see him naked when he speaks. That last bit's metaphorical, usually, though I heard about one trial where the defendant's hymation just fell off repeatedly. He lost the case. Timotheos, the mystery cult expert, nods sagely. The chthonic gods love specific requests. Vague curses get vague results. You want someone impotent? Specify when, where, with whom. The gods appreciate detail work. It's like commissioning art. You get what you pay for in precision. My favorite, Lysander contributes, managing to avoid mentioning Sparta, was a curse tablet targeting a whole theater troupe. May their costumes rot, their masks crack, their phalluses detach mid-performance. Opening night. The lead actor's prosthetic came off during a crucial scene, rolled right into the orchestra. The musician tried to kick it back, missed, fell into the chorus. Best comedy I've seen, though not the one written. But surely educated men don't believe in such superstitions. Nicias protests weakly. The room erupts in laughter. Last year's Archon, Nicodemus reveals, commissioned 17 tablets against political rivals. I know because I delivered them to the curse writer, very specific about genital misfortunes. One rival developed a rash shaped like the Archon's seal. Explain that without divine intervention. The love curses are most disturbing, Creton admits. Forcing desire where none exists. May she burn for me. May she forget family and friends. May her thighs open only to my presence. It's romantic assault via lead and prayer. Those work both ways, warns a voice from the corner. A merchant named Dionysios, a different one, Athens has thousands, shares his cautionary tale. Cursed a hetaira to desire only me. It worked. She desires me constantly, exclusively, violently. I can't leave my house without disguises. She's camped outside right now. The curse writer says it's irreversible. I'm considering moving to Persia. The technical aspects of curse creation fascinate the drunk symposiasts. Proper lid sourcing, recycled from coffins, is best. Inscription techniques, backwards writing adds power. Placement locations, crossroads, graves, or under enemy's threshold. It's arts and crafts for the vindictive. What about counter curses? Someone asks. Ah, Nicodemus grins unpleasantly. That's where it gets interesting. Curse wars between households can last generations. My family's been exchanging hexes with our neighbors since my grandfather's time. Started over a property dispute. Now we just curse each other from habit. Their roosters crow at midnight. Our olive trees produce bitter fruit. Their sons develop speech impediments. Our daughters grow excessive body hair. It's tradition. Hippocrates attempts medical explanation. These curses work through humoral imbalance triggered by psychological stress. Believing you're cursed creates physical symptoms. The mind affects the body. The body manifests the curse. It's perfectly logical if you understand pneumatic theory. Then explain the merchant who grew a tail. Timotheos challenges. Excessive spinal humor accumulation. Hippocrates responds without missing a beat. Rare but documented. Curse correlation is coincidental. And the stories grow wilder. Curses that make men ejaculate backwards. Women cursed to orgasm only during Senate speeches. A particularly creative tablet that made its victim aroused exclusively by pottery. His wife adapted, someone notes. Very understanding woman. Impressive amphora collection now. The gods must spend all their time managing these petty curses, Xenophon muses philosophically. That explains their general negligence. Aristodemus agrees. Too busy handling make my enemy's penis sneeze requests to deal with actual prayers. Don't joke, Nicodemus warns with drunk seriousness. I've seen curse tablets targeting gods themselves. May Aphrodite know frustration. May Zeus's thunder misfire. Hubris beyond measure, but desperate people dare anything. The symposium contemplates this theological possibility. Gods themselves subject to mortal cursing. It's democracy taken to logical extreme. Everyone gets a vote, even against divinity. The real curse, Callistos, the former athlete, observes, is living in a city where your neighbor might be hexing your genitals while smiling at the market. Trust becomes impossible when anyone could be commissioning your erectile dysfunction. That's why we have symposiums, Alexios declares with drunken wisdom. Hard to curse someone you've shared wine with. Guest friendship creates magical immunity. Probably, unless someone cursed the wine. Has anyone else's tongue felt numb? Paranoia ripples through the room as everyone examines their wine cups suspiciously. In a city where lead tablets and ill wishes are valid political tools, every symptom becomes suspect. That headache, curse, that stumble, hex, that unfortunate arousal during the tax collector's speech, definitely magical interference. Curses and tablets are amateur work, scoffs a voice that's been silent most of the evening. It's Glaucon, whose brother writes mythological epics for wealthy patrons. You want real perversion? Let me tell you what the gods get up to. Makes our worst behavior look like children's games. The room eagerly leans in. Divine debauchery is everyone's favorite topic. It's gossip about celebrities who can't sue for defamation because they're immortal and fictional. Glaucon stands, steady despite the wine, with the confidence of someone about to share really spectacular dirt. Everyone knows Zeus can't keep it in his chiton, he begins. But do you understand the creativity involved? Swan for Leda, that's just the beginning. Bull for Europa, golden shower for Danae, snake for Persephone, his own daughter. The god of justice commits more sexual crimes than all of Athens combined. Don't forget the eagle, Proclus adds helpfully. Ganymede didn't stand a chance. Prettiest boy in Troy, suddenly airborne in talons. Next thing he's Zeus's personal cupbearer. Cupbearer, we all know what cup he's bearing. The theological implications unfold like a particularly sordid scroll. If the king of gods is a serial, shape-shifting rapist, what does that say about divine morality? Everyone agrees it says nothing good, but the stories are too entertaining to abandon. My favorite, Theophilos contributes, is Pasiphae and the bull. Poseidon makes her lust after a bull as punishment, so she has Daedalus build a wooden cow for her to hide inside. The mechanics alone. How did Daedalus explain that commission? I need a hollow cow with strategic openings for agricultural purposes. The Minotaur was the result. Glaucon continues. Half man, half bull, all problem. They had to build a labyrinth to contain him. Imagine being the contractor. Why does this palace need a maze? The queen fucked a bull, and we need somewhere to put the outcome. Ah, Tuesday in Crete, then. Hippocrates attempts scientific analysis. The gods' transformations represent psychological states. Zeus as swan symbolizes aggressive grace. Zeus as bull represents primitive power. Zeus as golden shower represents needing to get creative with tower security. Aristodemus interrupts. Sometimes a pervert god is just a pervert god. What about Aphrodite? Nicias asks, then immediately blushes. Born from severed genital foam, Lysander notes with relish. Her origin story is basically cosmic bukkake. No wonder she governs sex. She is sex, literally crystallized from divine ball juice and seawater. Every time you pray to her, you're worshipping concentrated cock foam. This theological revelation silences the room momentarily. Then everyone starts redesigning their prayers to Aphrodite with this new context. The gods' punishments are worse than their lusts. Timotheus observes. Actaeon sees Artemis bathing. She turns him into a stag. His own dogs eat him. Proportional response, the virgin goddess has serious issues. Speaking of Artemis, Glaucon grins wickedly. Ever wonder why she demands virgin priestesses? And why so many former virgins end up mysteriously pregnant during their service? Divine immaculate conception is surprisingly common, almost like someone's sneaking into the temple at night. Someone who can take any form. My cousin served at Artemis's temple. Antiphon shares. Said the divine visions were very specific, always involved tall, bearded figures with suspicious resemblances to Zeus. The goddess herself never appeared, but her father showed up regularly. Make of that what you will. The conversation spirals through divine sexual atrocities. Hades kidnapping Persephone, romantic abduction, the classic. Apollo pursuing Daphne until she turns into a tree. When your dating technique drives women to become vegetation, maybe reconsider. Dionysus's entire existence, god of wine and madness, whose conception involved Zeus sewing him into his thigh, divine empreg. The satyrs and centaurs, Callistos adds, exist because gods can't stop fucking everything, half-human creatures everywhere, all testament to divine inability to keep species separate. The mythological world is basically one giant paternity suit. Don't forget the punishments for refusing gods, Proclus notes darkly. Cassandra refuses Apollo. Cursed to predict truth no one believes. Medusa raped in Athena's temple, turned into a monster as punishment. The god's definition of justice is whatever makes the better story. My brother, Glaucon continues, wrote an epic where Zeus falls in love with his own reflection in a pool, spends 3 days trying to seduce it, finally masturbates into the water, creating a new river nymph who's technically his daughter clone. The patron loved it, said it showed divine self-love. That's nothing, Dionysios the merchant chimes in. I heard a rhapsode perform a version where Heracles' 12 labors were all sexual metaphors, cleaning the Augean stables, not about horse shit, the Lernaean Hydra. Every head he cut off represented a different orifice. The girdle of Hippolyta? Well, that one's obvious. Xenophon tries to restore dignity. These stories serve cultural functions. They establish boundaries by showing their violation, teach proper behavior through divine misbehavior. They teach that power means never having to ask consent, Lysander counters, which explains a lot about how cities operate. We model ourselves on gods who solve problems through transformation, abduction, and strategic genital deployment. The heroes aren't better, Glaucon notes. Achilles and Patroclus, everyone knows what was happening in that tent. Heracles and Iolaus, his nephew, Theseus abandoning Ariadne after she saved him. Heroes are just gods with shorter lifespans and longer body counts. What about the monsters? Someone asks. Sexually frustrated divine offspring, mostly. Timotheus explains. Scylla, transformed by jealous goddess. Charybdis, divine punishment for gluttony. The Sphinx, abandoned child of divine bestiality who takes revenge through lethal riddles. Greek monsters are just therapy-needing children of dysfunctional divine families. The mythological dysfunction continues unraveling. Every story reveals new layers of divine perversion. Prometheus didn't just steal fire. Some versions suggest what he really stole would make fire look innocent. Pandora's box contained all the evils of the world, but nobody specifies what those evils were. Given divine proclivities, imagination fills the gaps uncomfortably. The worst part, Glaucon concludes, is we tell these stories to children. Here's your cultural heritage. Kids, shape-shifting rapists, bestial pregnancies, and creative murder. Now honor the gods. Then we wonder why Athens has so many curse tablets and mystery cults. We're all trying to appease sociopaths with unlimited power. Maybe that's why we drink, Alexios suggests profoundly. Easier to worship properly when you're too drunk to think about who you're worshiping. Everyone raises their cups in agreement. To the gods, may they stay distracted with their own perversions and leave mortals to their comparatively minor sins. Speaking of divine justice, announces a voice from the doorway, where a late arrival sways dramatically. It's Stephanos, a lawyer known for defending the indefensible. Forget your gods and monsters. Mortal law is where true perversion lives. Last week alone, I defended 3 cases that would make Zeus blush. The symposium perks up. Legal scandals are the best kind. Real people, real consequences, real opportunities for creative interpretation of extremely flexible laws. Stephanos collapses onto a couch, somehow managing to spill wine he isn't yet holding. First case, he begins, accepting a kylix. Citizen accused of hubris against a melon. The room explodes in questions. No, wait, it gets better. His neighbor claims he performed indecent acts with said melon in view of the man's wife. The defense? The melon seduced him. We brought in 3 witnesses to testify about the melon's provocative curves. Did you win? Theophilos asks incredulously. Mistrial. The jury couldn't stop laughing. The melon was presented as evidence, and someone ate it during deliberation. Can't convict without the victim. This launches a flood of legal absurdities. Apparently, Athens's courts, designed to handle property disputes and murder, spend half their time adjudicating sexual misconduct cases that stretch the definition of both sexual and misconduct. My favorite, Proclus shares, was the hetaira who sued a client for breach of contract. He'd promised to achieve climax within a specific time frame, but finished early. She demanded compensation for professional disappointment. The jury sided with her, set precedent for performance standards in the industry. Don't forget the reverse cases. Antiphon adds, citizens suing prostitutes for excessive competence leading to addiction. Your Honor, her techniques have ruined me for my wife. The courts actually hear these complaints. Democracy means everyone gets their day in court, even if that day involves explaining why you can't stop visiting a specific brothel. Stephanos warms to his theme. The laws themselves are insane. Adultery is illegal, but only for women and only if caught in the act. The number of almost caught cases I've defended. Yes, they were naked in bed together, but nobody saw actual penetration, could have been discussing philosophy. Judges accept this. They have to. Half of them have used the same defense. What about the Moicheia laws? Nikias asks, referring to adultery punishments. Ah, Stephanos grins. The cuckolded husband can legally insert a radish up the adulterer's anus, large radish, publicly. It's justice via vegetable violation. I've defended 6 radish recipients. The trick is arguing about radish size. Law doesn't specify dimensions. I once got a client off with a baby radish. He walked funny for a week, but kept his dignity. The prostitution laws are better, Lysander notes. Perfectly legal if you're foreign or enslaved, illegal if you're a citizen. Unless you're a flute girl, then it's entertainment. Unless you also teach music, then it's education with benefits. The classifications multiply until everyone's legal somehow. Glaucon jumps in. My neighbor's son was charged with corrupting youth. His defense? He was teaching them wrestling, very vigorous wrestling, private lessons. The boys improved. Muscle tone, proved educational value. Case dismissed. The legal loopholes multiply like rabbits in spring. Temple prostitution is religious, not commercial. Sex in gymnasiums is athletic training. Orgies are religious if you invoke Dionysus first. The law becomes a game of semantic twister, where winners keep their citizenship and losers get vegetable justice. The best case I ever witnessed, Stephanos continues, now properly drunk, involved a citizen accused of prostituting himself, loses citizenship if proven. His defense? He wasn't selling sex. He was renting his body as a musical instrument. Clients would play him to produce specific sounds. The demonstration in court was memorable. The acoustic arguments were surprisingly sophisticated. Did it work? Everyone demands. Half the jury joined the demonstration. Case dismissed due to participant conflict of interest. Hippocrates, the physician, contributes medical legal overlap. I testify as expert witness regularly. Doctor, could this injury occur from vigorous philosophy discussion? Doctor, is it medically possible for a womb to wander into a merchant's shop and seduce him? I've developed very flexible medical opinions. Justice requires creative anatomy. What about inheritance cases? Creton asks. Those are the worst. Stephanos groans. Widow claims her husband's brother visited nightly to comfort her, producing an heir. Brother denies it. Baby looks suspiciously like brother. Widow insists it's divine resemblance. The gods made the baby look like the uncle to test faith. I've seen judges accept this rather than untangle inheritance law. The prostitution tax creates amazing situations. Nicodemus adds, Hetairai must register and pay, but proving someone's a prostitute versus just very friendly. I've seen tax collectors stationed outside suspicious houses with tally sheets. That's your third visitor today, madam. They're all cousins. Very affectionate family. We're Greek. The conversation reveals Athens's shadow economy of sexual services, creative legal interpretations, and professional perjurers. Everyone knows someone who's been to court for something embarrassing. The democracy that produced Socrates also adjudicates whether a cucumber was used criminally. The age of consent laws, Stephanos explains, are masterworks of confusion, different for boys, girls, citizens, non-citizens, with exemptions for religious festivals, educational purposes, and traditional mentorship. I keep charts. The charts have subclauses. The subclauses have footnotes referencing other cases that contradict everything. My favorite legal principle, Xenophon notes, trying to sound philosophical while listing severely, is that penetration determines guilt. The penetrator commits hubris. The penetrated suffers it, unless money changes hands, or it's Tuesday, or someone invoked Aphrodite first, Greek law, where grammar determines morality. Don't forget the sycophants, Proclus spits, professional informants who make their living accusing citizens of sexual crimes, taking a cut of any fines. Last month, one accused me of corrupting my own slave, my slave, that I own. The logic was spectacular. By treating him too well, I was corrupting the natural order. Cost me 2 drachma to make it disappear. The worst are political trials, Stephanos concludes. Can't attack someone's policies, accuse them of taking it up the ass. Literally most effective political strategy. Half of Athens's leaders have defended their anal integrity in court. The other half were the accusers, democracy. As the evening wears on, you realize Athenian law is less a system of justice and more interpretive dance with potentially fatal consequences. Every citizen is one creative accusation away from radish justice or worse. The courts that should protect civilization instead spend their time debating whether that thing with the goat was religious expression or criminal perversion. To Greek justice, Stephanos raises his cup. May your enemies always be caught in the act, and may you always have witnesses to your innocence, and may your vegetables stay in the kitchen, someone adds, to general applause. The symposium has reached that ethereal stage where profound truth and complete nonsense merge like wine and water in a crater. The flute girl gave up playing actual melodies hours ago and now produces sounds that could charitably be called experimental. Half the guests are horizontal, the other half wish they were, and someone's definitely going to need help finding their sandals come morning. You know what I've realized? Alexios announces to the ceiling, having achieved a perfectly diagonal position across 2 couches. We've spent all night discussing perversion, sacred prostitution, pederasty, curse tablets, divine bestiality, and it's all just Tuesday in Athens. Exactly, Theophilos agrees from somewhere under a table. My grandmother used to say, if you're not doing something that would horrify a Persian, are you even Greek? The room mumbles agreement. What counts as perversion when your culture celebrates naked athletics, institutionalizes mentor-youth relationships that modern times would criminalize, and worships gods who solve problems through creative shape-shifting and strategic rape? We're all perverts, Proclus philosophizes, waving his kylix like a conductor's baton. Every single Greek, we just wrapped it in philosophy and democracy and called it civilization. Speak for yourself, Lysander protests weakly. In Sparta, you're worse. The room roars in unison, though with notably less coordination than earlier. Stephanos the lawyer attempts to stand, fails, continues from the floor. That's why I love my job, every day, defending the indefensible. Your Honor, my client didn't violate that goat. He was conducting a theological experiment. The prostitution was actually performance art. That's not an orgy. It's a committee meeting with unusual protocols. Maybe that's the secret, Timotheos muses, still seeing through dimensions from whatever he drank earlier. We created democracy because we needed a system complex enough to justify our behavior. Can't have tyranny. One person can't generate enough excuses for what we do. The conversation drifts into increasingly abstract territory. Xenophon argues that perversion is just innovation applied to human interaction. Hippocrates insists it's all humoral imbalances requiring genital-based treatments. Callistos maintains that Olympic training explains everything. Once you've wrestled naked in olive oil for 4 hours, conventional boundaries seem arbitrary. You want to know the real perversion? Nicodemus asks the room. We sit here, supposedly civilized, discussing philosophy and politics, but give us enough wine and we reveal the truth. We're barely domesticated primates who happened to invent democracy between orgasms. To barely domesticated primates, and someone toasts, and then everyone drinks, despite several people missing their mouths entirely. I've been thinking, Nicias announces, with the careful pronunciation of the very drunk. Every society probably thinks they're normal, and everyone else is perverted. Persians probably sit around horrified by our nudity. Egyptians think we're bizarre for not marrying siblings. Scythians wonder why we don't drink from skull cups. But we are normal, Antiphon insists. We invented logic. We invented logic to explain why it's acceptable to fuck our students, Glaucon counters. That's not normal. That's just elaborate. The symposium has become a confession booth where 12 drunk men admit their culture might be completely insane. The realization should be sobering, but everyone's too intoxicated for introspection to stick. Know what's truly perverted? Aristodemos manages. We'll wake up tomorrow, pretend this conversation never happened, and go back to our respectable lives. I'll produce family-friendly tragedies. Stephanos will defend more vegetable-based justice. Hippocrates will prescribe orgasms for anxiety, and we'll all act like it's perfectly reasonable. Because it is reasonable. Theophilos argues from his floor position, in context, Greek context, which is admittedly a very specific context that requires extensive footnotes. The flute girl has stopped playing entirely and appears to be sleeping standing up, still holding her instrument. Her assistant gave up on percussion and is using the drum as a pillow. Even the entertainment has reached its limits. Maybe the mystery cults have it right, Timotheos suggests. At least they admit they're doing something transgressive. We just call it Tuesday and wonder why tourists look traumatized. I motion, Proclus announces formally, that we declare ourselves the most successfully perverted civilization in history. We've institutionalized, legalized, and philosophized behaviors that would destabilize any reasonable society, and we've been doing it for centuries. Seconded, multiple voices cry out. All in favor? Alexios calls for a vote, because even drunk at dawn, Greeks must have democratic process. A chorus of ayes mixed with hiccups and one person who might be voting or just snoring affirmatively. Motion passes. We're officially perverts, democratically confirmed perverts. Dionysios, who's been silent for an hour, suddenly speaks. You know what this means? We've spent all night discovering what we already knew. We're exactly who we've always been. Greeks, messy, complicated, oversexed, overthinking Greeks who turn dysfunction into art form. To dysfunction, another toast, though most cups are empty and several people are toasting with sandals or small furniture. The sun's coming up, someone notices. Indeed, dawn's rosy fingers are creeping through the windows, just like Homer described, though Homer probably didn't imagine them illuminating 12 philosophers in various states of consciousness and undress, surrounded by empty wine vessels and the debris of civilization. We should end with a prayer, Nicias suggests with drunken piety. To which God? Multiple voices ask. All of them. They're all perverts anyway. They'll understand. And so 12 barely conscious Athenians attempt a collective prayer to their pantheon of shape-shifting, boundary-violating, creatively procreating deities. It's incomprehensible, sacrilegious, and somehow perfectly appropriate. As you stumble toward the door, helped by a slave who's professionally ignoring everything he's witnessed, you realize you've learned more about Greek culture in one night than years of philosophy lectures could teach. It's been educational in ways your education never prepared you for. Same time next month? Alexios calls out. Absolutely. Everyone agrees, because where else can you discuss curse tablets, sacred prostitution, and divine bestiality while pretending it's philosophical discourse? You step into the Athenian dawn, squinting at the familiar city that now seems alien with knowledge. Every temple might house secret orgies. Every gymnasium definitely hosts more than athletics. Every court case could involve vegetable justice. Every myth masks perversions that make human behavior look tame. But the city's waking up, citizens beginning their respectable daily routines. The democracy that spent all night revealing its perversions will spend all day pretending they don't exist. It's hypocrisy elevated to art form, dysfunction transformed into functioning society. As you weave your way home, avoiding eye contact with other late-night stragglers who probably have their own stories, you understand why Greek culture endures. not despite its perversions, but because of them. By acknowledging the chaos, categorizing it, giving it religious sanction and legal framework, Greeks found a way to be exactly who they are without apology. Well, with some apology. To the goats, at least. You pause at a herm, those ubiquitous pillars with Hermes' head and prominent phallus. Yesterday you walked past dozens without thought. Now you see them for what they are, civilization's admission that we're all just barely contained chaos, pretending at order. You reach for the Hermes phallus, for luck. You tell yourself, though after tonight you're not sure luck is what you need. Your fingers brush the worn stone where thousands of other hands have touched, each person carrying their own secrets, their own participation in Athens' elaborate dance between propriety and perversion. The marble is smooth, almost warm in the growing light, and you wonder if that's the sunrise or the accumulated hopes and shames of your fellow citizens. The city sounds different now. Those roosters crowing might be cursed. That merchant opening his shop early might be recovering from mystery rites. The woman sweeping her threshold could be preparing for tonight's Dionysian celebrations, or cleaning up from last night's. Every normal morning routine carries potential doubles meanings, hidden subcurrents of the Greece you thought you knew. Your feet find their own way home through streets you've walked countless times, but now you notice things. The graffiti scratched into walls. You'd assumed it was political. Now you recognize the crude drawings and creative suggestions for what various politicians can do with themselves. The fountain where women gather to gossip probably hosts more than water drawing. Even the sacred olive tree in the corner of the agora looks different when you remember what Greeks do with olive oil. As you climb the steps to your door, each movement requires concentration. Your body is heavy with wine and knowledge, weighed down by revelations that can't be unlearned. Inside, your wife sleeps peacefully, unaware that you've spent the night discovering just how unpeaceful Greek peace really is. Or maybe she knows. Maybe everyone knows, and the real perversion is pretending we don't. You collapse onto your bed, still fully clothed because removing your hemation seems like an impossible task requiring engineering skills you don't possess. The ceiling spins gently, a wooden cosmos rotating around your head, and you close your eyes to make it stop. But behind your eyelids, the night replays in fragments. Lysander's Spartan horrors, Timotheos's mystery revelations, that medical diagram Hippocrates drew with wine on the table that you really hope was exaggerated. Sleep creeps up like fog from the harbor, soft and encompassing. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the city itself as it transitions from nocturnal chaos to daytime pretense. Somewhere, a temple bell rings, calling faithful worshippers to morning prayers. You wonder if they know what their priests do after dark. You wonder if the priests themselves remember, or if wine and ritual madness provide their own kind of mercy. The last thing you hear before unconsciousness claims you is your neighbor's voice through the wall, greeting his wife, asking about breakfast, mentioning he needs to stop by the courthouse later. Normal morning conversation. Except now you know he was at the symposium too, Know what he shared about his experiences with Hetairai. Know about that cursed tablet he commissioned against his business rival. But his voice carries no hint of this knowledge. The mask of civilization fits perfectly in daylight. Your dreams, when they come, are fragmented and strange. You're in the gymnasium, but everyone's wearing full Persian armor while wrestling. Socrates floats by in a basket, explaining the true meaning of virtue, which somehow involves radishes. Zeus appears as a swan, but speaks in Lysander's voice about Spartan marriage customs. The goddess Athena judges a contest, but it's not about wisdom, it's about who can balance the largest ceremonial phallus on their nose while reciting Homer. Even in sleep, your mind tries to process the unprocessable. Greek culture is a labyrinth more complex than the one that held the Minotaur, and you've spent the night wandering its twisted passages. Each turn revealed new impossibilities, new ways humans find to complicate existence, new reasons to both celebrate and question the civilization you call home. But sleep is merciful. It takes the sharp edges of revelation and softens them, wraps the night's perversions in gauze of dreams until they become bearable. Tomorrow you'll wake with a headache and fragmented memories. You'll go to the agora, conduct business, discuss politics and philosophy with the same men who tonight revealed their participation in Athens' elaborate sexual economy. And everyone will pretend this is normal, because it is normal for Athens, for Greece, for a culture that looked at human nature in all its messy complexity and decided to build a civilization that accommodates rather than suppresses it. It's mad, certainly, perverted by any reasonable standard, but it works, somehow. The same society that institutionalizes pederasty produces Plato. The culture that parades wooden phalluses through streets creates democracy. The people who curse each other's genitals with lead tablets also develop theater, philosophy, mathematics. Your breathing deepens into true sleep as Athens continues its eternal cycle around you. In a few hours, you'll join that cycle, taking your place in the elaborate performance of Greek civilization. You'll walk past those herms without touching them in public. You'll discuss philosophy without mentioning last night's applications. You'll be a proper citizen during proper hours. But now, in these last moments before dawn fully claims the city, you can rest in the truth the symposium revealed. You're Greek. You're part of a glorious, perverted, impossible culture that refuses to apologize for being human. And tomorrow, after the wine wears off and respectability returns, you'll pretend to forget what you've learned. Until next month's symposium, when the wine flows again, and Athens once more reveals itself in all its complicated glory. Sleep now, dawn is here, bringing with it the temporary amnesia that makes civilization possible. Close your eyes and let the night's revelations settle into your bones, becoming part of the unspoken knowledge every Greek carries. You're home, you're safe, and you're exactly as perverted as your culture allows, which, as you've learned, is considerably. Sweet dreams, dear listener, may they be filled with philosophy and only manageable amounts of divine shape-shifting. Tomorrow brings another day in Athens, where the impossible is every day and the everyday impossible. Rest well. you'll need it.